One day you're going to wake up and realize that all the pain you cried over, all the people who broke your heart, all the nights you spent questioning your worth, they were not sent to destroy you. They were sent to wake you up. And when that awakening finally happens, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. There comes a moment in every person's life when they get tired, not physically tired, spiritually tired, emotionally tired, the kind of tired that sleep cannot fix, the kind of exhaustion that comes from giving your heart to people who only knew how to take pieces from it. Some of you listening to me right now know exactly what I'm talking about. You smiled for people while secretly breaking inside. You stayed loyal to people who treated your love like it was ordinary. You forgave people who kept repeating the same wounds over and over again. And every time it happened, you told yourself maybe next time will be different. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Pain changes people. Not the kind of pain that lasts for one day. I'm talking about repeated disappointment, repeated betrayal, repeated heartbreak. That kind of pain either destroys a person, you understand? Or it introduces them to a version of themselves they never knew existed. See, most people think strength is loud. They think strong people are the ones shouting, fighting, proving themselves to the world. But real strength is quiet. Real strength is when you finally stop begging for love that should have been given freely. Real strength is when you stop chasing people who keep running from you. Real strength is when you look in the mirror after everything you survive and say, I still deserve peace. I remember hearing a story about a man who spent almost 15 years trying to make everybody happy. He worked overtime for his family. He sacrificed his dreams for people he loved. He answered every late night call. He showed up every single time somebody needed him. But when he lost his job and his life started falling apart, the same people he carried suddenly disappeared. The phone stopped ringing. The support stopped coming. And for the first time in his life, he sat alone in silence. Now, most people would call that loneliness. But what if I told you that silence saved him? Because in that silence, he finally heard himself. For years, he had been listening to everyone. Why else? Their opinions, their expectations, their demands. But he never listened to his own soul. And sometimes God will isolate you because he needs you to hear a voice louder than the crowd. Your pain becomes the classroom. Your heartbreak becomes the lesson. Your loneliness becomes the mirror. That man later says something powerful. He said, the people who left me were not abandoning me. They were revealing themselves. Then some of you all need to understand that tonight. Every disappointment carries a revelation. Every betrayal uncovers truth. Every heartbreak removes illusion. Because people can only pretend for so long before life exposes who they really are. You know what hurts the most? It's not losing people. It's realizing you were willing to do things for them they would never do for you. That's the pain. That's the part that keeps people awake at night. The realization that your heart was genuine in a world full of convenience. But hear me carefully. Do not let that realization turn you cold. Let it turn you wise. There's a difference. Cold people stop loving. Wise people love differently. Cold people build walls so high nobody can enter. Wise people build boundaries so nobody can destroy them. And boundaries are not hate. Let me say that again because somebody needs to hear this. Boundaries are not hate. They are self-respect. They are the understanding that your peace is too expensive to keep giving discounts to people who don't value it. See, when you've been hurt enough times, something changes inside you. You stop explaining yourself so much. You stop forcing connections. You stop trying to convince people to appreciate you. Because mature people understand one powerful truth. If somebody cannot see your value, explaining it harder will not open their eyes. And that lesson usually comes after tears. It usually comes after nights where you sat on the edge of your bed wondering why your love was never enough. It usually comes after you gave chance after chance after chance until your soul became exhausted. But exhaustion has a purpose too. Sometimes exhaustion is life forcing you to stop carrying what was never yours to carry. You were never supposed to carry everybody's problems while ignoring your own healing. You were never supposed to save people who enjoyed drowning. You were never supposed to abandon yourself just to keep somebody else comfortable. One of the greatest tragedies in life is when good-hearted people slowly lose themselves trying to become enough for people who were never satisfied to begin with. And let me tell you something about people. Some people don't want healing. They want access. They want your energy, your kindness, your attention, your forgiveness. But they do not want accountability. They do not want growth. They want the benefits of your presence without the responsibility of respecting your heart. That's why you have to wake up. Because not everybody deserves unlimited access to your spirit. There's a woman listening to me right now who keeps replaying old memories in her mind. She keeps wondering if she should have stayed longer, loved harder, fought more. But what she doesn't realize is this: love should not feel like emotional survival every single day. And there's a man listening to me who was taught his entire life to suppress his emotions. He kept taking disrespect and silence because he thought strength meant enduring pain quietly. But now his heart feels heavy. His soul feels disconnected. And he's beginning to understand that ignoring pain does not heal it. Healing begins when honesty begins. You cannot heal what you continue pretending doesn't hurt. That's why some people stay broken for years. They distract themselves instead of confronting themselves. They keep busy because silence scares them. But healing requires silence sometimes. Healing requires reflection. Healing requires uncomfortable truth. And truth has a way of changing everything. The truth is, some people only love the version of you that kept sacrificing yourself. The truth is, some people enjoy your weakness because it gave them control. The truth is, some people never expected you to finally choose yourself. But the moment you do choose yourself, everything changes. You walk differently. You speak differently. You tolerate less. And suddenly the same things that once broke you no longer have power over you. See, pain has stages. At first it crushes you. Then it teaches you. Then eventually it strengthens you. That's why the strongest people are usually the gentlest people, because they know what suffering feels like. They know what abandonment feels like. They know what it's like to cry in silence while pretending everything is okay. And once you soup your AR, Viv, that kind of darkness, you stop wanting to hurt others. You simply want peace. Real peace. Not fake happiness for social media. Not temporary distractions. Not attention. Peace. The kind of peace that allows you to sleep at night without carrying bitterness in your chest. And peace requires release. You have to release resentment, release guilt, release the need for revenge. Because carrying anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other person suffers. One day you realize the greatest revenge was never becoming bitter. The greatest revenge was healing so deeply that the people who hurt you no longer control your emotions. That's freedom. And freedom changes everything. I once heard somebody say, when you finally heal, you stop reacting to things that once destroyed you. That hit me deeply. Because healed people move differently. They don't argue over every misunderstanding. They don't chase closure from people committed to misunderstanding them. They don't beg for loyalty. They simply observe actions and adjust accordingly. That's growth. Growth is not becoming emotionless. Growth is becoming emotionally intelligent. It's learning that not every battle deserves your energy. It's understanding that protecting your peace is more important than proving your point. It's realizing that some doors are blessings only after they close. And some of you are grieving doors God personally shut to save your future. You're crying over people who were blocking your growth. You're mourning relationships that were draining your spirit. You're questioning endings that were actually protection in disguise. But one day you'll look back and thank God for every rejection, every delay, every heartbreak, every goodbye. Because some losses are not punishments. They are preparation. Preparation for the stronger version of yourself that is finally waking up. And once that version fully awakens, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again the same way. Not because life stops being painful, but because you finally stop abandoning yourself for people who never valued your heart. There was a time in your life when you thought being needed meant being loved. And because of that, you kept overgiving. You kept showing up for people who only remembered your name when they were falling apart. You answered every call, solved every problem, carried every burden, and somewhere in the middle of saving everybody else, you lost yourself. That's what happens to good-hearted people. Nobody teaches them how to protect their energy. Nobody teaches them that compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. So they grow up believing love means sacrifice, even when the sacrifice slowly kills their peace. And one day they wake up emotionally empty. Not because they had nothing left to give, but because too many people kept taking without pouring anything back. Maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you've reached that moment where your smile looks normal to everybody else, but inside you feel disconnected from yourself. Maybe you're tired of pretending you're okay just to avoid explaining your pain. Maybe you're tired of carrying wounds nobody can see. But listen to me carefully. Your breaking point is not the end of your story. Sometimes your breaking point is the beginning of your transformation. See, life has a strange way of teaching lessons through pain. And the lessons that hurt the most are usually the ones that change us forever. There was a young woman who spent years trying to earn love from people who came. It always made her feel small. Every relationship felt like a competition she could never win. She changed the way she dressed, the way she spoke, even the way she laughed just to make others comfortable. She became whatever people needed her to be because deep down she was terrified of rejection. One night she sat alone in her apartment after another painful disappointment. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself, not physically, spiritually. She realized she had spent so much time trying to become lovable that she forgot who she originally was. And that realization broke her. But it also awakened her because for the first time in years, she asked herself one simple question. What if I stopped chasing acceptance and start choosing myself? That question changed her life. Not overnight. Healing never happens overnight. Healing is messy. Some days you feel strong. Other days memories hit you out of nowhere. Some mornings you wake up confident, and by nightfall you're questioning everything again. That's normal. Healing is not a straight line. It's a process of slowly rebuilding trust with yourself. And trust with yourself matters more than people realize. Becoming. Many people don't actually struggle with trusting others. They struggle with trusting themselves after ignoring red flags, after settling for less, after staying too long in situations that damage their spirit. That's why self-forgiveness is so important. Some of you are still punishing yourselves for things you survived years ago. You replay mistakes in your head every day. You keep asking yourself why you didn't leave sooner, why you ignored the signs, why you gave so many chances. But stop condemning the older version of yourself for not knowing what the healed version knows now. You learn through experience, and experience is a painful teacher. Sometimes you only recognize manipulation after you escape it. Sometimes you only understand your worth after somebody treated you like you had none. That pain taught you discernment, and discernment is powerful. Because once you develop discernment, people can no longer fool you with pretty words and temporary affection. You begin paying attention to consistency, to actions, to patterns. You stop falling in love with potential and start respecting reality. That's maturity. Maturity is realizing that chemistry does not guarantee compatibility. Just because somebody excites your emotions does not mean they deserve access to your life. Some connections feel intense because they trigger your wounds, not because they are healthy. That's why healing matters before relationships. Because unhealed pain will make chaos feel like passion. And too many people confuse emotional instability with love. Real love feels safe. Real love does not constantly make you question your value. Real love does not force you to beg for honesty, effort, or respect. The problem is many people grew up around survival instead of healthy love. So they learned to normalize dysfunction. They learned to accept breadcrumbs because they were starving for affection. But when healing finally begins, your standards change. You stop entertaining inconsistent energy. You stop chasing people who send mixed signals. You stop shrinking yourself to fit inside places that were never meant for your growth. And let me tell you something powerful about growth. Growth will cost you relationships. Not because you became arrogant, but because the old version of you was easier to control. The healed version of you asks questions. The healed version notices manipulation. The healed version walks away from disrespect instead of negotiating with it. And everybody will not celebrate that transformation. Some people benefited from your lack of boundaries. Some people were comfortable when you kept putting yourself last. But now you're learning how to say no without guilt. You're learning how to leave without explaining yourself endlessly. You're learning that protecting your peace is not selfish. That scares people who only value your obedience. But let them be uncomfortable. Your healing is not supposed to make everybody else comfortable. Your healing is supposed to free you. And freedom sometimes requires distance. Distance from toxic environments. Distance from draining conversations. Distance from people who only contact you when they need something. You know what's dangerous? A person who finally realizes their worth after years of self-neglect. Because once they wake up, they stop settling. They stop begging. They stop forcing. They understand that loneliness is far less painful than constantly feeling unappreciated around people. And that realization changes everything. There comes a point. Your soul becomes tired of chaos. You no longer crave excitement that leaves emotional damage behind. You no longer find comfort in temporary validation. You start craving peace more than attention. That's evolution. And peaceful people move differently. They don't need to announce their growth every day. You see it in the way they respond, or better yet, the way they no longer respond. See, one of the strongest things a person can learn is emotional detachment, not becoming cold, not becoming heartless. Emotional detachment means understanding that you cannot control other people's choices, actions, or opinions. You stop exhausting yourself trying to force understanding from people committed to misunderstanding you. And when you finally let go of that burden, your spirit becomes lighter. Because the truth is, some battles were never yours to fight. You were trying to prove your loyalty to people who already decided not to value it. You were trying to explain your heart to people who only listen long enough to benefit from you. You were trying to earn love from emotionally unavailable people. That's not love. That's emotional survival. And survival mode will outdrain every ounce of joy from your life if you stay there too long. But one day, something inside you shifts. You stop asking, why did they hurt me? And you start asking, why did I keep abandoning myself trying to keep them? That question changes your perspective completely. Because healing is not only about what happened to you. Healing is also about what you tolerated because you didn't yet recognize your own worth. That's why self-worth is life-changing. When you truly know your value, manipulation stops working on you. Guilt stops controlling you. Fear of abandonment stops owning you. Because you realize something powerful. People leaving your life is not always a loss. Sometimes it's alignment. Sometimes life removes people because your next season requires peace they could never provide. And trust me, peace is expensive. It costs old habits. It costs toxic attachments. It costs the version of you that kept accepting emotional pain just to avoid being alone. But once you experience real peace, you'll never want to return to chaos disguised as love. Never again. You begin protecting your energy differently. You become careful about who gets access to. Your mind, your heart, your time. Because you finally understand that energy is contagious. The people around you influence your spirit more than you realize. That's why healed people become selective. Not because they think they're better than others, but because they know how painful it is to rebuild themselves after emotional destruction. And rebuilding yourself is not easy. Some of you rebuilt yourselves quietly while still going to work every day. Some of you smiled in public while privately fighting battles nobody knew existed. Some of you survived nights that almost broke your spirit completely. But look at you, you're still here, still breathing, still growing, still becoming. And maybe that's the miracle you haven't fully appreciated yet. The fact that after everything life tried to crush you with, your heart still wants peace instead of revenge. That means your soul is healing. And once your soul truly heals, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you the same way again. Before heartbreak, many people don't truly know who they are. They know the version of themselves that exists when life is comfortable. They know who they are when they feel loved, accepted, noted. But pain introduces you to another side of yourself, a deeper side, a stronger side, a side that learns how to survive storms nobody else can see. And sometimes the strongest people are created in the loneliest seasons. There are people listening to me right now who had to rebuild their entire lives in silence. Nobody clapped for them. Nobody encouraged them. Nobody even knew how badly they were hurting. They just kept waking up every morning carrying invisible weight while trying to function like everything was normal. That kind of pain changes you forever, but not always in a bad way. See, when you survive emotional pain long enough, your priorities begin to shift. You stop chasing shallow connections. You stop needing constant validation. You stop entertaining drama that once consumed your energy. Suddenly, peace becomes attractive. Solitude becomes healing. And your relationship with yourself becomes more important than your relationship with people who drain you. That transformation is powerful because the world teaches people to fear being alone. It teaches people that loneliness is failure. So many stay in toxic situations simply because they are terrified of emptiness. They would rather be emotionally exhausted with the wrong person than temporarily lonely while healing. But hear me carefully tonight. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Sometimes isolation is where clarity is born. Sometimes God removes distractions because your spirit cannot heal while constantly surrounded by noise. There's a reason your intuition gets louder in silence. There's a reason your soul starts speaking when the chaos finally disappears. And some of you all ignored your intuition for years. You felt something was wrong, but you stayed. You noticed the disrespect, but you minimized it. You saw the inconsistency, but you kept making excuses. Why? Because hope can become dangerous when it keeps you attached to situations reality already exposed. That's why wisdom matters. Wisdom is learning the difference between seeing potential and seeing patterns. Potential says maybe one day they'll change. Patterns say this is who they consistently choose to be. And mature people stop falling in love with possibilities while ignoring repeated behavior. That lesson usually comes after disappointment. It usually comes after trusting people. You promised forever but disappeared when things became inconvenient. And one of the hardest truths in life is realizing that some people only know how to love you when you are useful to them. As long as you're giving, sacrificing, supporting, forgiving, they stay close. But the moment you require reciprocity, accountability, or honesty, they pull away. That's not connection. That's convenience. And convenience disappears when effort becomes necessary. But don't let that make you bitter. Bitterness is what happens when pain stays unresolved too long. Healing is choosing not to let your wounds poison your future. That choice matters because unhealed people often recreate the same suffering in different forms. Different faces, same pain. Different relationships, same patterns. Why? Because what remains unhealed keeps repeating itself until it is finally confronted. That's why self-awareness is so important. You have to ask yourself difficult questions. Why do I keep accepting less than I deserve? Why do I feel responsible for fixing broken people? Why do I confuse inconsistency with excitement? Why do I abandon my own needs to avoid rejection? Those questions are uncomfortable, but uncomfortable questions lead to honest answers, and honest answers lead to freedom. Freedom from toxic cycles, freedom from emotional dependency, freedom from constantly needing approval to feel valuable. And once you experience that kind of freedom, your entire life changes. You start recognizing your own power, not power over other people, power over yourself, power over your reactions, power over your boundaries, power over what you allow into your spirit. See, emotionally mature people understand something most people never learn. Protecting your peace is not weakness. Walking away from disrespect is not weakness. Refusing to participate in toxic behavior is not weakness. That is strength, real strength. Anybody can stay attached to chaos because they fear starting over. But it takes courage to leave what's familiar in order to protect your future. And starting over is terrifying, especially when you invested years into people, dreams, or relationships that eventually broke your heart. But let me tell you something beautiful about starting over. You do not begin empty. You begin wiser. You begin with lessons. You begin with discernment. You begin with experience that teaches you what your soul can no longer tolerate. That's growth. Growth is painful because it requires letting go of old versions of yourself. The version that begged for attention, the version that accepted emotional crumbs, the version that confused attachment with love, the version that kept shrinking to fit into places too small for your spirit. That version of you has to die so a stronger version can finally live. And I know that sounds harsh, but transformation always requires release. Even nature teaches us that. Trees lose leaves before new growth appears. Storms clear environments before sunlight returns. And sometimes your life has to fall apart in certain areas so your soul can rebuild correctly. But while you're rebuilding, be patient with yourself. Healing is not perfection. You're going to have moments where old memories still hurt. You're going to have moments where loneliness visits unexpectedly. You're going to have moments where you question whether all this growth is worth it. That's normal. Don't judge yourself for healing slowly. Some wounds were created over years. They will not disappear overnight. What matters for us is that you keep choosing yourself every single day, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. Choose rest instead of self-destruction. Choose honesty instead of suppression. Choose peace instead of chaos. Choose distance instead of disrespect. And most importantly, choose yourself without guilt. Because many good-hearted people were taught that choosing themselves is selfish. So they keep sacrificing their mental health trying to save everybody else. But you cannot continuously pour from an empty soul. At some point, you must become responsible for your own healing. And healing requires letting people face the consequences of their own choices. That's difficult for compassionate people, because compassionate people want to rescue everyone. But listen carefully. You are not responsible for carrying people who refuse to carry themselves. You are not required to destroy your peace to prove your love. You are not obligated to stay connected to people who repeatedly disrespect your heart. One day you finally realize that love without respect becomes suffering. And that realization changes your standards forever. Suddenly, words no longer impress you. Consistency impresses you. Effort impresses you. Honesty impresses you. Emotional maturity impresses you. Because healed people stop chasing intensity and start valuing stability. And stability is underrated. Peaceful love may not feel like fireworks every second, but it feels safe. It feels calm. It feels honest. It allows your nervous system to rest instead of constantly preparing for disappointment. That's the kind of peace your soul deserves. Not confusion, not mixed signals, not emotional gains. Peace, real peace. And when you finally protect that peace with your whole heart, something incredible happens. You stop fearing loss so much. Because you realize your greatest loss was never other people leaving. Your greatest loss was every moment you abandoned yourself trying to keep people who were never meant to stay. But now you're changing. Now you're waking up. Now you're understanding your value on a deeper level. And the deeper that understanding becomes, the harder it becomes for anybody to manipulate your emotions again. Because healed people can still love deeply without losing themselves. They can care without self-destruction. They can forgive though reopening doors that destroyed their peace. That's wisdom. And wisdom protects your heart in ways pain never could. One day you look back at every heartbreak, every betrayal, and every painful lesson and realize they didn't break you, they built the strongest version of you. And when you finally choose your peace, protect your worth, and trust God with your journey, nothing and nobody will ever have the power to destroy your spirit again.